Welcome to the delightfully unconventional world of Holding Up the Queue. This irregular, irreverent podcast explores esoteric ways of thinking, the magic of storytelling, and some unexpected corners of creativity, taking the harlequinade as the wellspring of some unusual and fascinating themes. Hello, I'm Simon from Benjamin Pollock's Toy Shop, and welcome to the second episode of Holding Up the Queue. My guest today is the artist Charlotte Cory, someone who definitely knows how to hold up a queue. Best known for her Victorian work, which is a complete, fantastical, wholly believable, alternative 19th century in which animals are in charge.
Clothed animals, because we're actually going to talk about anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism, can you say it?
Anthropomorphism.
Oh, well done.
I've said it.
Yeah. And toy theatre, of course, because the reason that I frequent your wonderful Benjamin Pollock's Toy Shop is it's my spiritual home. I have a complete and total passion for toy theatre, always have had, as you will no doubt hear.
Brilliant. There are two books which are very special to me, which I came across in my early years. The first is called Patrick Comes to Puttyville.
Never heard of it.
A story of a young bear who moves with his single mother from the seaside town of Catfish Bay to a strange country village called Puttyville. The basis of the story is how Patrick interacts with other inhabitants, learning lessons about friendship, trust, generosity, all along the way. All the animals are dressed as humans.
Surprise, surprise.
The second book is French, entitled Chaminou avec le Rempire, a tale set... For those who can't see, Charlotte has just made a very funny face at me because she can speak French. So apologies everyone to my bad French. Now, this is a tale set in an all-animal world that closely resembles a late 60s, early 70s American private eye TV show. Now, as you can tell, I couldn't speak French, but this tale set in an all-animal world, it absolutely fascinated me. And I would look at it and pore over it for hours. Patrick Comes to Puttyville was the first novel I ever read from cover to cover. Now, the interesting thing is, if either of these books had been about human beings or regular animals, just say speaking, I don't think they would have held anything like the same fascination that they did. Now, I'm going to say to you, Charlotte, why do you think this is? But first of all, what is it you're doing there? Are you listening to me?
Oh, yes. No, it's just that I have to colour in my Grand Visitoria Theatre. Because, one doesn't have a lot of colouring in time. And I'm a bit behind with getting...
Well, you'll have to... While you're doing that, you're going to have to sort of interact with me. Don't get too involved. It's very lovely, though. Tell us a little bit about it.
Do you want one to colour in?
Can I have one to colour it? Can I colour... Who can I colour
Well,
in?
you'll have to choose. Lady Louisa Lodge as the dashing Miss Frederica in the recently revived production of the popular Miss Frederica's Secret Day Out, currently showing at the Grand Visitorium. Or Miss Perenelle Pelham.
Oh.
Or Miss Bessie Polygon, look at her. Or what about Henry Birtles as young Master Bernard in a scene?
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, OK, right. Borrow some crayons.
Lovely. Can I do both?
No, only one. Choose.
I have Henry Birtles because I know that if I do the other one, you won't like it because you want it.
Yes, I know. I'm very particular about
Right,
my
can I
colouring.
nick your colours?
We might actually do a giveaway to people who tweet at the end of this, mightn't we?
Oh, that's a good idea.
They can
Absolutely.
have one of these prints, unless we do them all, of course.
They can win our handiwork.
Or maybe they prefer to do their own.
Maybe.
Oh, careful, that's a bit slapdash.
No, I'm only starting. Don't be mean. Now, what? Going back to what I was saying about my fascination with these sort of dressed human animals, what was it? Because we have to say to people here, these lovely characters, they are people, but they're animals. They're a cross between people and animals. And that. So what does anthropomorphism mean?
Well, the thing is, they're neither people nor animals, which is why they're Visitorians, because most of my artworks are based on carte de visite, which was early form of move the crowns, Victorian photography. and I use for the photographs, and then I superimpose my own photographs of animals, always taxidermy, so they're contemporaneous. And then people talk about characters, or they try to say they're people but with animal heads, or they're animals with people's bodies, and they're not. They're actually something else altogether. And then one day I thought they're visitorians, because that's exactly what they are. But it's a very interesting process. When you put an animal's head on a human body, you create something entirely different, something more human than human. But I started doing it because I have an absolute obsession with Victorian photography, and I used to collect them up when nobody else did, for pence, in junk shops, because I felt very sorry for them. They'd lost their families, they'd lost their provenance. Can't really believe how families get rid of family photographs.
No, I agree with that. I think that's very sad.
But they do. And then nobody knows who this person is, and it has no value. I think the celebrities and sort of famous people were always, pictures of Queen Victoria were always collected and expensive, and they always were. But the ones that interest me have no provenance, and I give them a new life. But if dispossessed old photographs are sad, there is something actually sadder, and that's taxidermied animals. Museums used to be absolutely full of them. Drawing rooms, people used to have them.
But there's been a resurgence in interest, so hasn't there, recently?
Oh, well, unfortunately, yes. But my interest was not the interest of fashionable collecting of taxidermy that has actually happened since I was started using the pictures, because I was actually giving the dead animals new life.
Right.
And also saying something about when you photograph a person and you preserve their image on a glass plate, you are just preserving them on a glass plate. With an animal, you shoot it, which is exactly what you do when you take a photograph. You use the language of photography which is vicious, snapshot capturing. But animals were preserved for real, shot and then stuffed.
But sometimes, yes, that's usually the way, but sometimes they're pets. Sometimes they were people's pets and they died. I've got a bunny rabbit at home, a lovely big white rabbit, and I bought him very quickly because he was very cheap and he was beautiful, and I thought someone's going to run in and grab him and buy him. And I love animals. I have to say I love animals. We've always had cats and dogs and things, and I'm not for hunting and things like that. But when I bought it and took it, I was then told afterwards that what I'd left behind, and I hadn't realised, was the information about it, and it had lived in a pub, and it was like the mascot of this pub in the Edwardian period, and everyone loved it, and because it was loved so much, they had, for want of a better phrase, had it stuffed. So sometimes, not always. I know what you mean. I accept what you mean, but not always the case.
Not always, but little old ladies who had their pet dogs stuffed when they died, I actually find slightly macabre.
Right.
I couldn't imagine doing that with any of my animals.
Right, no, I agree with that.
Do you know something that happened to me? Although I find taxidermy pretty disgusting as a process, I actually also fascinated by it, and I've always looked at taxidermy. All the taxidermy I use, by and large, is in museums all over the world. I go and I sort of look at the different, I go to the natural history museums and I look at what they have. And for instance, in Dublin, they have this vast polar bear that was shot very early on, before anybody knew what a polar bear was like. The skin was sent back, and they reconstructed this animal that does not look like a polar bear. Because once, it was the only way you'd actually get to see an animal.
Yeah. Well, it's like a friend of mine, he was an ornithologist, and he went in this little shop somewhere in Norfolk. There was a book on ornithology, and there was a Staffordshire figure. And he only had X amount of money and he could only afford one. And he bought the book on ornithology, but he always regretted that he didn't buy the Staffordshire, because the Staffordshire was a lion, but it had a human face. Because obviously no one had seen a lion up close who was in the process of painting, because they were painted by sort of people, poor people and children for pennies for their rent to go back to their sort of humble lodgings. Let me show you something.
Oh, what have you got to show me?
This is something that I know a lot of people don't like, but people are divided. People love them or hate them. People are always fascinated. And it's Walter Potter's Curious World of Taxidermy.
Oh, this little dioramas.
Yes, this was a museum first off. Walter Potter's own lovely little museum in the Victorian period. And what it was filled with, we don't know how he got them, and we won't go down that avenue. But it was
went
filled
out and
with
trapped them.
Well, in the museum, it was full of tableaus. And where this was different to other taxidermy, and remember this was a time, as we were just saying, when taxidermy was very, very popular one way or another. What's different about these is the fact that the tableaus show social situations using the animals. So they will be dressed, they will be sitting at tea, they will be playing cricket, they'll be in the classroom, rabbits reading and doing things in the classroom. Sometimes the animals are just animals and they're posed, but they have all the accoutrements of modern life at the time. These beautiful, almost like dolls' houses, like everything will be to scale. But the ones which I think are the most strange are the dressed versions. And one of them...
Do you think that because he was called Walter Potter, he thought of doing this to copy Beatrix Potter?
That's a good point. I'd never thought of that, Charlotte.
He couldn't actually draw himself.
Yeah.
But he could go out and shoot Jemima Puddle Duck and
exactly.
Stuff her in a...
And Tom Kitten.
Yeah.
But these are, for example, it's one of those weird things because a friend of mine very dear friend of mine, who absolutely loves animals, she loves cats and rabbits particularly. I have a book I was once given, and it's postcards, and I don't like it, but it's a fascinating, once again, socio-historical reference point where you have these animals and they are posed through cardboard panoramas in clothes and things, so they're alive and they're looking at you in their expressions and things, but it's as if they're doing things, so someone might be doing the ironing or something like that. Those I don't like, but once again, it's a fascinating thing that what used to be acceptable. I showed her that and she was absolutely appalled by it. Oh, it was horrible, didn't like it, was really upset by it.
The animals look very, very
absolutely,
uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, these animals look comfortable, but
they look comfortable.
They're dead.
See, that's the thing.
It's because they're stuffed.
I know, but then that means that people are tricked into liking them. Then what I suppose my idea is that we go to another realm with it, and we start to. It's almost like being children. We suspend our belief in what was into what should be. So therefore, when we look at these now, they're not stuffed animals. They become real, living visitorians.
But the thing about my photography is that they were all alive at the point they were photographed. The dead animals, obviously, I photographed them when they were dead. I put them together and given them a new life that you can actually sort of believe in, and
you can more romantic.
You can do it on Photoshop without actually distressing. I mean, all these poor cats were probably he had so many. They
used to throw them in. Well, or also one thing people used to do was, they would.
But it's not respectful,
is it?
It's not respectful.
It's not. Well, it's not that it's not respectful. But what would you? These now, they fetch thousands and thousands.
Well, you
of
see,
pounds.
that's what I'm uncomfortable about this, because
this
I
is
was
what I'm
using
saying.
taxidermy to make a statement
yeah.
about the way humans treat animals,
right.
And that's where I was coming from. That
right.
photography is bad enough that people die and the picture is still there, but then families throw them out.
Right.
But the animals were shot and stuffed, put in museums, and then chucked out, and then now collected up. To the extent that actually there are now businesses creating new taxidermy, and people try to make out, it's all roadkill. But how do we know?
There isn't. No.
And then on the internet you can buy stuffed animals from Asia or wherever, and people don't seem to care because they want the item.
Yeah.
And it's the commodification of the animal kingdom. I'm very uncomfortable with it. But then I'm a vegetarian.
Yeah.
I'm actually vegan. I do eat yogurt. I have to eat some things that provide me with enough protein. But I'm very uncomfortable where yogurt comes from, because it's the whole dairy industry that treats animals absolutely disgustingly. I'm not proud of being a human being.
No, I mean, lots of us aren't. I know, exactly. And remember, we're the ones who are doing this anyway.
Yeah.
But what I'm then saying is we rightly have those beliefs. But it's funny how sometimes, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is sometimes to look at something in another context tricks our way of thinking.
Well, it's certainly, I hope that with my photography, you look at the characters, and you're meant to be very uncomfortable. I mean, there's
that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting.
There's a process where at first you think, people tend to look at them and go, "Oh, ha ha, how funny, a wolf dressed up as a gentleman." And then that immediate laughing, there's a sort of quietness, because actually it's profoundly sad.
Well, that's the thing with these, exactly.
And look at her.
We go around it. We go from sort of knowing what's wrong, being upset, and then we
But if that was
suddenly
my fox
accept
terrier
this.
shoved into a dead, skinned, because that's and then sewn onto a cast, and then put in clothes and frankly made twee.
But the fact is, if people were aware, if they showed these with the process, of course people would be like, oh my God. But the fact the process isn't there, and the fact that they are sort of prettified. But I think
that's what makes them interesting. But
Yes,
the
exactly.
general taxidermy, which is usually trophies for hunters.
Yeah, well, we're not.
You see,
this is the thing.
that
We're not
is something
talking about
else.
those. I'm interested in this as an idea because it's taking that horrible genre and it's trying via human beings to make it acceptable.
It is doing
Yeah.
3D Beatrix Potter, but it has to be said that in Victorian times, taxidermy was very, very important for artists.
Yes,
It was the only
exactly,
way
yeah.
of actually sitting and drawing a lion. I mean, you go to
Yeah.
London Zoo and try
Absolutely,
and draw a lion.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if they still have lions. They're always hidden.
Yeah.
To actually see a giraffe, to actually see the animals. And I once had the great fortune to go to Mucha's studio, Alfons Mucha, in Prague, when his daughter-in-law was still looking after it, and it was full of the taxidermy that appears in his pictures.
Wow.
And that was the main role,
Yeah.
really. And
Yeah, like lay figures. It's like, Do you think then maybe another idea is that for the children of the time who were caught up in the whole phenomena of Beatrix Potter, because it was a huge explosion, wasn't it, very quickly?
Oh, and lots of copycat
do you think
books.
this was their way of sort of, they wanted to see those creatures real, and of course they can't see them real because they're not real.
It's probably a bit
This
like
is the
going
next
to
best
Hamleys
thing.
and buying a toy.
Exactly, it's like where things come from.
Yeah.
It's scratch the surface, and who knows what you find. But yeah, so I think it's an interesting moment in time.
It was very interesting that the whole collection, when it was sold off and offered to the National Trust.
Yeah.
And
a very low
for
rate
nothing,
as well, yeah.
and they didn't. And then it was, I think Damien Hirst bought a lot, and it's all been dispersed. And what a tragedy! At least somebody did a book of it. I actually do think, I seriously think that the toys that children get, the books that they get, really, really young children, do something profoundly fundamental, and you have to be so careful. And
But let's say, what's your early memories of Anthropomorphia? Because we've all, they're always in the toys. That's the easiest way to find it.
Well,
the
I
most
hate
immediate.
talking about my childhood because I wasn't that happy, but I did have a load of felt toys that my grandmother gave me. I used to line them up in my bed each night, and I know that I was younger than 5 because we moved house, and we didn't have enough bedrooms. So if I misbehaved with one sister, I got moved in with my brother, misbehaved with him, got moved back. And these toys went with me as I was always in trouble for some reason. I mean, I can't think why. And one day my mother threw them away. She had no idea the importance of those not that interesting felt toys. That's what she saw.
What were they? Can you remember what they were?
Just felt animals in clothes, I think, that were made. I just have a vague memory.
Right.
I did have a rabbit, a bigger rabbit.
I had a rabbit in a waistcoat.
Yeah, she'd knitted something. I don't think they were terribly good because later I saw a cousin. She'd obviously done something similar. But it was the loss of them. But there was also something else that really lived with me, and that's that she had this box it's a brown cardboard box, and it was very high up. And it was in the room I shared with a sister for the rest of my childhood, in the house we moved to. And it was too high up for me to ever get down, and on it said Toy Theatre. And I was desperate to see in that box, and I never did. But she told me it was a toy theatre that belonged to her father, who died when she was 9. So I think she was a bit screwed up by the fact she didn't have a father.
Right.
And we did. So
Right.
there was always sort of references to, you're so lucky, you've got sisters, you've got a father. Well, a bit odd. But that box I was obsessed by.
Right.
And then at school I won a prize for magic art when I was 11, and I threw myself into this project of magic art all that summer. I wanted the prize, mainly because every year a prize was handed out and I didn't know what it was, and I wanted to know what the prize was.
Right.
And I won it. And I have to say that the person who gave me the prize was Peggy Angus, the great,
Yeah.
because she used to go and teach at this school. And the best thing about...
Tell us a little bit about, just quickly tell the audience about Peggy Angus.
Well, Peggy Angus is now really celebrated. I didn't know it until very recently, that she was a friend of Edward Borden's and Revilia's, and she was known as Red Peggy because she was a communist, which is a bit odd because this was a direct grant school, but... maybe she thought the direct grants were very communist because you got into it if you were clever.
Yeah.
And they were paid by
Well, it's a meritocracy, isn't it?
Yeah, which was obviously abandoned. And that school is now the North London Collegiate, one of the sort of top girls' schools, independent, and costs a fortune. I mean, how anybody pays to send their kids there to post-tax income. Yeah. But in Red Peggy's day, it was, you went there, and thank goodness I had amazing art teachers. And she gave me this toy theatre from Pollock's, and I made it up, and I loved it. I loved it and loved it and loved it till I'm afraid I went off to... I left home and went off to university to do English because I wasn't allowed to do art, the only thing I was really good at. And my mother threw it away.
But that's a fate of lots of us.
But then, not that long ago, because I did think I probably ought to make my peace with these very elderly dotty parents, and I went to see them. And the first thing they told me was that they had already given their wherewithal, everything, to my extremely wealthy brother who works for the United Nations, with a wife who works for a Japanese company, and that, after all, he had children and he would inherit everything. I just sat there and thought, well, fine. Well, I'm not that surprised because I've been the daughter who hasn't been around for 30 years. And then she said to me, is there anything you'd like? And my eyes swiveled round the room. And I saw the toy theatre box.
Oh.
And I said, well, actually, the thing I would really like is the toy theatre box up there. And my father was also, because he's nearly 90, huffing, puffing, because this is the prodigal daughter who doesn't deserve anything.
So did he resent you having the magic box?
Yeah. But I climbed up. I took it down. I put it in the car.
Good for you.
We drove away. And I got it home.
When you got it, though, when you picked it down, did you think, well, I've got it,
I did, actually. And I sat in the car giggling because... and in the box, I didn't bring the box because...
But look at that, I have to describe.
No, you're not allowed to touch.
Oh, no, I'm not going to touch. I'm going to describe. I'm not touching nothing. I'm going to describe it. Let me describe it,
No, I'm going to just announce what it is. This is my inheritance. This is my inheritance. Look at it.
And you kept it in a plastic folder.
No, I put it in. I took it out of the box to bring it to show you. So
I'm not.
Because it may rain.
Okay.
Okay, right. You describe it, because...
Right. What we have here is a pile of beautiful old... What printed pieces of paper, the most magical printed piece of paper, beautiful envelopes with wonderful, lovely old curly Q writing on, and old stamps.
They're all addressed to Miss Ebbs at some address or other. Some of them care of the Tower of London.
Blimey, was she in the Tower?
This one, care of Major Hodge, Battalion York House, Farnborough.
But why was she... What's the Tower of London?
Well,
what was that?
I have, as you can imagine, spent long hours looking through this, gloating over it. Miss Ebbs, I believe, was a governess.
Right.
And she kept the wretched children in her care quiet by doing toy theatre with them.
Because what this is, under all the letters... poking out are rocks
Every
and
single
leaves and little
envelope
sides
contains the complete cast of a play.
Oh my God!
Regard.
Look at that! Wow.
Hands off, Simon. This
I'm
is
sit
treasure.
Back here because I'm jealous.
This is treasure beyond belief. But isn't it beautiful?
But what I love, Charlotte, is the fact that this is treasure.
Yes.
And you waited, and in being the
yes.
prodigal daughter, you created a spell, and you got the real treasure.
Can you believe?
I can believe. It's wonderful. Yeah. I think the point I'm trying to make, Charlotte, is that moving something that was once or is upsetting to people or can be viewed in a sort of negative way, you always get the good from the bad. So what I always look at is I look at the fact that from this element of these animals which are dressed and everything, and to some people are seductive, to others they're repulsive. From that, if we move away from it, it goes into another area of art and it becomes transformed. So it's an essential ingredient, especially, for example, a lovely artist who we're showcasing called Annie Montgomery.
Oh, I had a look at her work. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so so you do you see what I mean?
You're having them in the shop at Christmas.
So tell me, absolutely. Tell me what you like about Annie Montgomery's work. Sort of describe it to the audience.
Well, they're obviously dolls, toys, but they are very taxidermic. They're dolls with animal characters. I was very impressed. I'm really looking forward to seeing them.
But they're imbued, aren't they, with a real life.
Oh, yeah, they're like Beatrix Potter for the 21st century.
This is the thing, and I think that's what I was thinking with
How many are you going to
Walter Potter
have
ones.
on the show?
I'm not sure. Oh, about 5, I think. I think about 5, yeah. I mean, we're really looking forward to it. So, Charlotte, going back to what you were saying, that story about your childhood and the lovely felt animals, which led to the lovely magic box. One of my stories, one of my memories, also, I suppose, sort of, if we're talking about anthropomorphism, which we are, when I was a child growing up in the 70s in London, London was very different to what it was now, and it was sort of better and worse. It was very dirty, dark, very concrete, but it was very magical as well. But it was a very urban place, and I always longed. I had this idea to live in the countryside, and in my mind, it was crystallised in a wonderful moment in October in the afternoon, about 2:30, just as twilight starts to come up, and the blackberries on the bushes are there in the distance. And in my mind's eye, I used to look at lovely postcards and books by people like Ray C. Helps and Margaret Tempest.
You basically wanted to live in
Alice in that world. Initially, I wanted to, because I was a complete sissy, I wanted to live in...
Did you know that Alice and Utley fell out badly with Margaret Tempest?
I didn't know that. I mean, that's another story. But with that world... That, for me, I think through my sort of trials and tribulations as a child, which we haven't got time to go on with, that was my sort of safe place. And one thing, another artist we're showcasing is Farn Petty. I hope I've got your name right, Farn. And she seems to have brought my October afternoon in this anthropomorphic world into the here and now, and she's doing a wonderful. She's
lives in the Far East,
from Thailand, yeah.
But she's done a complete interpretation of the English storyboard world, which is magical.
Yeah.
Yes,
and what she's done is she's created this wonderfully strange and very beautiful and very. There's nothing dark about it. Very romantic fairground, but it is in the nature of Utley and Helps, this wonderful, very soft, very romantic, very comfortable, very idyllic moment. Almost like when you're a child, that's like your sort of nectar. You know, as we get older, we like a nice glass of wine in the afternoon. But when you're a child, that's your nice glass of wine in the afternoon. When I was a child,
I just wanted to read all the time. I read everything in the library and lived in these worlds.
Excellent. Right, I'm going to ask you a question, Charlotte.
Oh, yes?
And I want you to answer honestly. What would you do if you're walking along the road, like going to get shopping, and you turn round, you heard, "Excuse me," and you turn round, and there was a dressed animal, and they said, "Do you know the way to Baker Street?" What would you do?
Easy. I'd get out my phone and I'd Insta them. Hashtag holding up the queue, I think.
Wow. I tell you what we could do, actually. Why don't we, actually, this is to all the listeners, why don't you tweet a picture of yourself or Insta a picture of yourself as your spirit animal or as a Victoriana character,
and then we could give a prize, one of the prints.
What good idea. What good idea. Actually, one other person you might be really interested in, Charlotte, is an artist called Hannah Dyson. And she already is doing work for us, and she does wonderful anthropomorphic work. You can see her work on our website, as well as all the other contemporary illustrators working with us.
Oh, am I there?
You are.
Oh.
You are.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. And what was her name, Hannah?
It's Hannah Dyson.
I'll have a look, yeah.
So, anyway, I think there's been a huge growth in the queue. Sorry, everyone. So, I'm afraid I'm going to have to say thank you very much for holding up the queue.
Oh, it's been fun.
I think I've got to get on to the next customer now, so off you go.
Oh, okay, booted out. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, next customer, please. Thanks for listening to Holding Up the Queue. These podcasts are created by Benjamin Pollock's Toy Shop in Covent Garden, at the heart of London Theatreland for over 80 years. Find out more about Benjamin Pollock's by visiting our website, pollocks-coventgarden.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter at Pollock's Toy Shop and join the conversation at #HoldingUpTheQueue.